I'm Megan, 29, and I just stood frozen in my kitchen as my mother's words sliced through me like a blade. I don't know how someone so dumb could afford such a nice place, she whispered to my perfect sister Lily, unaware I was around the corner. For years, I've lived in Lily's shadow, the architect daughter they never quite respected despite my success. Now Lily's engaged, and somehow, without asking, they've decided my dream home is the perfect venue for her engagement party. The invisible daughter, the convenient host, the family doormat. But not anymore. Today is the day everything changes. Before I continue with my story, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and standing up for yourself. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one unfolds. Growing up as the overlooked child in a family of high achievers was like existing in a shadow that constantly expanded no matter how bright I tried to shine. My mother, Judith, has been a respected sociology professor at the State University for over 30 years. She's published 6 books, been featured in countless academic journals, and has always had very specific expectations for her daughters. My father, Lawrence, is a cardiovascular surgeon who spends more time in the operating room than at home, but when he is present, his approval means everything. And then there's my younger sister Lily, beautiful, charismatic, and somehow always the center of attention since the day she was born 3 years after me. Growing up, there was never a question about who was the favorite. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, my parents would nod approvingly before asking if I'd helped Lily with her homework. When I won second place in the state science fair in 10th grade, they attended the ceremony but spent most of the time talking about how Lily had just been selected for the lead in the school play. My achievements were expected, Lily's were exceptional. For my 16th birthday, I received practical gifts, a set of professional drawing tools for my budding interest in architecture and a college prep book. For Lily's 16th, my parents threw an elaborate party, invited half the school, and surprised her with a car. Your sister is more social, my mother explained when I questioned the disparity. She needs these things more than you do. When I graduated with honors from a prestigious architecture program, my parents attended but left early because Lily had a minor dance recital the same weekend. You understand, my father had said, not really asking. This performance is important to her. My graduation apparently wasn't important enough to warrant their full attention. As adults, the pattern continued. Lily called home daily and received immediate assistance with any problem, while my calls went to voicemail for days. When I struggled to find my first job during the recession, my mother suggested I might have aimed too high and should consider something more aligned with my abilities. Meanwhile, they paid for Lily's graduate school without hesitation when she changed her mind about her career path for the 3rd time. Despite it all, I persevered. I worked at a small architecture firm, living frugally in a tiny apartment, taking on extra freelance projects on weekends. My colleagues recognized my talent even when my family didn't. I was promoted twice in 3 years, saved aggressively, and eventually started looking at properties. The lakeside home I finally purchased was my greatest achievement, a beautiful mid-century modern with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, spacious enough for entertaining yet cozy for everyday living. I'd spent countless hours renovating it myself, painting every wall, refinishing the hardwood floors, updating the kitchen with my own hands while learning from YouTube tutorials. This house represented everything I'd accomplished despite the lack of support, a physical manifestation of my determination and success. I'd hoped, perhaps naively, that this achievement would finally earn me the respect I'd been seeking from my parents. That they would walk through the doors of my beautiful home and finally see me not as the daughter who wasn't Lily, but as Megan, the successful architect who had built something meaningful on her own terms. The Sunday dinner I hosted was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to redefine my place in the family. I'd spent days preparing, cooking my father's favorite roast, selecting wines I knew my mother would approve of, arranging fresh flowers from my garden. I even invited Lily, who was between boyfriends at the time and had recently started seeing someone new named Brandon. I wanted them all to see what I had accomplished, to be proud of me just once without comparing me to my sister. But some patterns are too deeply ingrained to break, and the dynamics that defined our family for decades wouldn't be undone by hardwood floors and a lake view, no matter how much I wished they would. The Sunday dinner started exactly as I had feared it might. My parents arrived 15 minutes late, my mother immediately commenting on the challenging drive to my remote location, though my house was only 20 minutes from their suburban home. My father handed me a bottle of wine that I recognized as one I had gifted them last Christmas, the price tag hastily removed but leaving a sticky residue on the glass. "The place looks interesting," my mother said as she walked through my living room, running a finger along my bookshelf as if checking for dust. "Very you, Megan." I knew from experience that very you was not a compliment in Judith's vocabulary. It meant unconventional, odd, not quite right. Still, I smiled and thanked her, determined to maintain a positive atmosphere. Lily arrived 30 minutes late with her new boyfriend Brandon in tow. She looked stunning as always in a floral dress that complemented her slender figure, her golden hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. Brandon was tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident demeanor of someone who had never been told no in his life. "Sorry we're late," Lily announced without sounding sorry at all. Brandon had a work call that couldn't wait. "He's in finance," she added with obvious pride, squeezing his arm. "That's fine," I assured her. "We haven't started yet." My father immediately engaged Brandon in conversation about investment strategies while my mother fussed over Lily's appearance, commenting on how the dress brought out her eyes. I excused myself to check on dinner, grateful for the momentary escape to my kitchen. I had just begun plating the appetizers when I heard footsteps approaching. I assumed it was Lily coming to help. She occasionally demonstrated brief flashes of consideration, but instead, I heard my mother and sister enter the adjoining dining room, apparently unaware that I could hear them perfectly from my position at the counter. "Brandon seems nice," my mother was saying. "Very successful for his age. Your father is impressed." "I know," Lily replied, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "He's taking me to Aspen next month to meet his parents. They have a cabin there." "That's wonderful, darling. You deserve someone special." There was a pause, and I heard the sound of glasses being moved on my dining table. I should have made my presence known, but something kept me rooted in place, continuing to arrange prosciutto and melon on a serving plate. "This house is actually nicer than I expected," my mother said, her voice lowered slightly. "The view is quite lovely." "I know, right?" Lily responded. I was surprised too. And then it happened. The moment that would replay in my mind for weeks to come. "I don't know how someone so dumb could afford such a nice place," my mother said with a light laugh. "She must be drowning in debt." The plate in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. My fingers went numb, and I had to set it down before I dropped it. Blood rushed to my face as heat crawled up my neck. I pressed my palms against the cool countertop, trying to steady myself. "Mom," Lily replied, her tone holding a hint of reproach but not enough to constitute a real defense. "That's not fair. Megan's not dumb, she's just different. Not everyone can be good at everything." "You know what I mean," my mother continued, unrepentant. "She's always had her head in the clouds. Remember when she thought she could get into that Ivy League program? Your father and I had to be realistic with her. Some people just need to accept their limitations. I had, in fact, been accepted to that Ivy League program with a partial scholarship, but had attended the state university instead because my parents had been unwilling to help with the remaining costs. We need to save for Lily's education, they had explained. She might want to go to medical school like your father. Lily never went to medical school. She'd graduated with a communications degree and had cycled through 3 different career paths since then. The conversation in the dining room drifted to other topics, but I remained frozen in place, those words echoing in my head. Dumb. My own mother thought I was dumb. After everything I'd accomplished, all the obstacles I'd overcome. Many of which they had placed in my path, that was still how she saw me. I don't know how long I stood there before I managed to compose myself enough to continue preparing dinner. When I finally emerged with the appetizers, my face carefully arranged into a neutral expression, no one seemed to notice anything amiss. My mother was showing Lily something on her phone, both of them laughing. My father and Brandon were still deep in conversation about tax strategies. Throughout dinner, I moved as if on autopilot, serving food, responding to questions, even managing to smile at appropriate moments. Inside, though, something fundamental had shifted. Years of suppressed feelings, hurt, resentment, anger, bubbled dangerously close to the surface. I found myself studying my family with new eyes, noticing how my father interrupted me 3 times but never once cut off Lily or Brandon. How my mother asked Brandon detailed questions about his career but had never once inquired about my recent promotion. How Lily dominated the conversation, secure in the knowledge that she was the most important person at the table. When my mother complained about the wine being too dry, I simply opened another bottle rather than mentioning it was the one they had brought. When my father checked his watch repeatedly during dessert, I pretended not to notice. When Lily spent 10 minutes describing her recent spa weekend without once asking about my life, I nodded and smiled as if interested. But I was different now. Something had broken inside me, or perhaps something had finally been set free. By the time they all left, my mother with a perfunctory cheek kiss, my father with a distracted pat on my shoulder, Lily with a promise to catch up soon that we both knew she wouldn't keep, I felt hollow and strangely calm. I closed the door behind them and stood in my beautiful home, the home I had earned through my own hard work and determination. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my anger. I was not dumb. I had never been dumb. And I was done being treated like I was. 2 weeks passed after that devastating Sunday dinner. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on an additional project that would keep my mind occupied. I declined my mother's invitation to their regular Friday night dinner with a brief text about a work deadline, the first time I had ever refused without offering an alternative date. If she noticed the change, she didn't mention it. I spent the weekend repainting my guest bedroom, a task I'd been postponing for months. The physical labor was therapeutic, allowing me to channel my emotions into something productive. With each brush stroke, I tried to cover up the hurt as easily as I was covering the pale yellow walls with a soothing sage green. On Monday morning, as I was reviewing blueprints for a new community center project, my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stared at it for several rings, contemplating letting it go to voicemail, but old habits die hard. I picked up. "Megan, wonderful news." My mother's voice was uncharacteristically animated. "Lily and Brandon are engaged." Despite everything, a genuine smile crossed my face. Whatever my issues with my family, I didn't wish Lily unhappiness. "That's great, Mom. When did this happen?" "Last night. He took her to that French restaurant downtown and proposed with his grandmother's ring. It's absolutely stunning, at least 2 carats. He comes from good family, you know." "I'm happy for her," I said, and I meant it, mostly. "Tell her congratulations from me." "You can tell her yourself at the engagement party," my mother continued, her tone shifting to the brisk efficiency I knew well. "We're thinking 2 weeks from Saturday. The 14th. "Oh, that's nice. Where are you having it?" There was a slight pause, and something in that hesitation made my stomach tighten. "Well, that's partly why I'm calling," my mother said. "We thought your place would be perfect. With the lake view and all that space. It's really the ideal setting." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "My place? You want to have Lily's engagement party at my house?" "Yes, it makes the most sense. Our house is being painted that week, and Brandon's parents' place is too far out of town for most guests. Your house has that lovely deck overlooking the water. It would be perfect for photos." My mind raced. They wanted to host a party at my home, a party I hadn't been consulted about until this moment. "How many people are we talking about, Mom?" "Not too many," she replied dismissively. "Just family and close friends." maybe 75 people? I've already spoken to that catering company we used for your father's retirement party. They can handle everything. 75 people. In my home. A party that had been planned without my input or permission. Mom, I don't know about this. That's a lot of people, and Megan, don't be difficult, she interrupted, her voice taking on the edge I knew too well. This is a special time for your sister. Brandon's family will be there, including his uncle who's a state senator. We need to make a good impression. But I wasn't even asked if. Honestly, Megan, it's not like you entertain regularly. Your house just sits there most weekends while you work or do whatever it is you do alone. At least this way, it gets some use. I fell silent, processing both the request and the casual dismissal of my life. Besides, she continued, filling the silence, Lily has her heart set on it. She loves your view. You wouldn't want to disappoint her, would you? After she's always been so supportive of you? The irony of that statement might have made me laugh if I weren't so stunned. When had Lily ever been particularly supportive? But the familiar guilt tactic was working, just as it always had. I'll need to check my schedule, I said weakly, knowing it was just a delaying tactic. What schedule? It's a Saturday. If you have plans, change them. This is your sister's engagement party, Megan. Family comes first. Family comes first. The mantra of my childhood, which somehow always translated to Lily's needs come first. Fine, I heard myself say, the word slipping out before I could stop it. The 14th. Wonderful. I'll tell the caterers. They'll need access to your kitchen that morning. And we'll come by early to decorate. Nothing too elaborate, just some flowers and perhaps those string lights on your deck. Oh, and we'll need to move some of your furniture to create a better flow for guests. By the time I hung up, the entire party had been planned without me having any real say in the matter. I sat at my desk, staring at the blueprints before me without seeing them, a familiar hollowness expanding in my chest. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily, OMG, thank you. So excited to celebrate at your place. Brandon's family will love it. You're the best sister ever. Attached was a photo of her hand sporting an enormous diamond ring. I set my phone down without responding. 20 minutes later, Lily called. Did you see my text? Isn't the ring amazing? She didn't wait for my answer. Mom told me you're letting us have the engagement party at your place. I'm so excited. It's going to be perfect. Congratulations on your engagement, I managed. Brandon seems like a nice guy. He's amazing, she gushed. His family is incredible too. His father owns like half the commercial real estate downtown. Wait until you meet them all at the party. About that, Lily. Mom didn't really ask me about hosting. She just kind of told me it was happening. Oh. There was a brief pause. Well, you don't mind, do you? I mean, your house is gorgeous, and you're always saying we don't visit enough. Now everyone will get to see it. It's just that 75 people is a lot, Anne. I've already told everyone, she interrupted. I said you insisted on hosting. Everyone thinks you're so generous. Brandon's mom was really impressed that my sister is an architect with her own lakefront property. Of course. I was being used as a status symbol, my home a convenient backdrop for Lily to impress her future in-laws. Lily, I have to run. Dress fitting with Mom. Love you, sis. You're the best. And she was gone, leaving me with a party I didn't agree to host and a familiar feeling of being steamrolled by my own family. That evening, I called my best friend Allison, the only person who truly understood my family dynamics. They did what? Allison exclaimed after I explained the situation. Without even asking you? That's beyond inconsiderate, Meg. That's just plain disrespectful. I know, I sighed, curled up on my couch with a glass of wine. But what can I do now? Lily's already told everyone it's happening at my place. She says I insisted on hosting. You could say no, Allison suggested. It's your house, Megan. You have every right to decide who enters it and when. You know I can't do that. They'd never forgive me for ruining Lily's engagement party. Maybe it's time to stop worrying about what they'll forgive and start thinking about what you can forgive yourself for. How long are you going to let them treat you like this? Her words hit home, echoing the thoughts that had been circling in my mind since I overheard my mother's cruel comment. How long would I continue to seek approval from people who had no intention of ever giving it? How many more times would I set myself up for disappointment? I don't know what to do, I admitted quietly. You do know, Allison countered gently. You're just afraid to do it. And I understand that fear, Meg, I really do. But at some point, you have to decide if your self-respect is worth more than their approval. As I hung up, I knew she was right. Something needed to change. I just wasn't sure I had the courage to be the one to change it. The 2 weeks before Lily's engagement party passed in a blur of escalating frustrations. What had started as an unwanted imposition quickly evolved into a full-scale invasion of my personal space and boundaries. It began with my mother showing up unannounced on a Tuesday evening with 3 large binders of party ideas. I was in the neighborhood, she claimed, though my house was nowhere near any place she would normally visit. I had just returned from a long day at work and was looking forward to a quiet evening, but suddenly my living room was covered in color swatches and catering menus. These curtains will need to come down, she said, gesturing to the custom drapery I had selected after months of searching for the perfect fabric. They're too heavy and dark for an engagement celebration. I'm thinking sheer white panels would be better for the photos. Mom, I chose those specifically for the way they frame the view, I protested. She waved away my objection. Just for the day, Megan. Don't be so precious about it. Now, about these sofas, they're positioned all wrong for a gathering this size. We'll need to push this one against the wall and move the coffee table to the guest room. By the time she left 3 hours later, every aspect of my home had been critiqued and found wanting. The art I had carefully selected was too abstract for Brandon's conservative family. My dining table, though it could seat 12, was inadequate for a buffet setup. Even my award-winning garden was deemed too wild and would need additional potted arrangements to look intentional. 2 days later, Lily and Brandon stopped by to see the space. Within minutes, Brandon was measuring my deck and discussing where to place a rented bar. We'll need to move these planters, he said, pointing to the ceramic pots containing herbs I had been nurturing all summer. They take up too much usable space. And those wind chimes have to go, Lily added, referring to the handcrafted set I had purchased on my first solo trip abroad. They'll interfere with the music. I stood in silence as they rearranged my home in their minds, transforming my personal sanctuary into a venue for their celebration. When Brandon suggested removing the bookcase in my study to make room for a gift table, I finally spoke up. I'd prefer if we could leave that as is, I said. Those books are organized in a specific way for my work reference. Brandon looked surprised that I had objected. Lily quickly stepped in. Come on, Meg, it's just for one day. You can put everything back exactly how you had it. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. Every item in my home had been chosen with care, positioned with purpose. Each represented a choice I had made for myself, an expression of my identity independent of my family. Yet here they were, casually dismissing these choices as insignificant, just as they had always dismissed my feelings and preferences. The weekend before the party brought the most egregious intrusions. My mother arrived with an army of helpers to prepare my house. I had taken the day off work, assuming I would be consulted about the changes, but instead found myself relegated to the role of bystander in my own home. Megan, be a dear and make coffee for everyone, my mother directed without looking up from her clipboard. Then you can help move those bookshelves to the garage. I made the coffee, watching in dismay as strangers rearranged my furniture, hung decorations I hadn't approved, and transformed my carefully curated space into something unrecognizable. My mother's friend Diane, who she had appointed as her co-organizer, kept referring to my kitchen as Judith's workspace when giving instructions to the helpers. "Judith, should we use the good china from the dining room?" she asked at one point. "No, Megan's everyday dishes are too mismatched," my mother replied, though she was standing right next to me as if I weren't there. "We've ordered place settings that will complement the color scheme." I retreated to my bedroom, the only space that had thus far escaped their makeover, and called Allison. "They're acting like I don't even exist," I said, keeping my voice low. "Like this is their house and I'm just in the way." "That's because you're letting them," Allison replied bluntly. "Meg, you need to set some boundaries." "I've tried. They just ignore me or make me feel selfish for having opinions about my own home." "Then be more forceful. It's your house, for God's sake." I knew she was right, but confrontation had never been my strong suit, especially with my family. Years of conditioning had taught me that speaking up led to dismissal at best, ridicule at worst. Nevertheless, I made an attempt when I overheard my mother telling a caterer they would be setting up in her daughter's house. "Mom," I said, approaching them, "I'd like to be included in these decisions. It is my house, after all." My mother looked at me with mild surprise, as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken. "Of course it's your house, Megan," she said with a tight smile. "But I'm the one with experience hosting events of this caliber. Let me handle it. I know what I'm doing." Later that afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with one of her friends. "Yes, we're having it at Megan's. Such a lovely view, though the house needs a woman's touch. I've had to help her organize everything, of course. You know Megan has never been good with these social occasions." That evening, Lily brought Brandon's parents over to see the venue. Mrs. Patterson, a slender woman with an expression of perpetual disapproval, walked through my home with an appraising eye. "It's quaint," she said, her tone making the word sound like an insult. "Rather modest compared to what Brandon is used to, but charming in its way." Mr. Patterson barely acknowledged me, spending most of the visit on his phone in my living room. When he did speak, it was to question whether my deck was structurally sound enough for the number of guests expected, despite the fact that I was literally the architect who had designed its reinforcement. By the time they left, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Every room had been rearranged, every personal touch questioned or removed. Even my refrigerator had been emptied of my food to make way for party preparations. The final straw came when I discovered my late grandmother's crystal vase. The one meaningful family heirloom I possessed had been carelessly shoved into a closet to make room for a larger floral arrangement my mother had ordered. The vase had been my grandmother's prized possession, given to me when I graduated college with the words, "You're going to do great things, Megan. I've always seen that in you." My grandmother had been the only family member who had consistently believed in me, who had seen my value independent of Lily's accomplishments. Finding her vase hidden away and chipped at the base was like losing her all over again. I stood in my closet, holding the damaged vase, and felt something shift inside me. The quiet anger that had been building since that Sunday dinner crystallized into resolve. This wasn't just about a party anymore. This was about years of disrespect, of being treated as less than, of having my achievements minimized and my boundaries ignored. Something had to change, and I realized with sudden clarity that I was the only one who could change it. With the damaged vase still in my hands, I made a decision. I carefully placed it on my bedside table and called Allison. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "I'm done being a doormat." Finally, she replied. "What do you want to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? For so long, I had focused on what my family wanted: their approval, their validation, their love. I had contorted myself into shapes that were unrecognizable, hoping that if I just tried hard enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. "I want to stand up for myself," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I want them to understand that I deserve respect." "I'm all for that," Allison said. "But we need a specific plan. What exactly are you going to do about this party?" I thought for a moment. I'm not going to cancel it, I decided. That would just make me the villain in their story. But I'm going to make it clear that this is the last time they can treat me this way. We spent the next hour discussing possibilities. Allison suggested everything from a dramatic confrontation during the party to simply changing the locks and going on vacation. I knew neither extreme would work for me. I needed something that would allow me to maintain my dignity while making my position clear. I think I need professional help with this, I admitted. I've spent years trying to navigate these relationships on my own, and look where it's gotten me. You mean like a family therapist? Allison asked. I was thinking more like my therapist, Dr. Morgan. I haven't seen her in a while, but she really helped me when I was struggling after grad school. Dr. Morgan had been instrumental in helping me build confidence during a particularly difficult period when my parents' lack of support had left me doubting my abilities. Maybe she could help me find the right words now. Fortunately, Dr. Morgan had an opening the next morning before work. Her office was as I remembered it: calm, neutral colors, comfortable chairs, and the faint scent of lavender. She greeted me warmly, her kind eyes taking in my tense posture. It's been a while, Megan. What brings you back? I explained everything: the overheard comment, the commandeered party, the invasion of my space, and the damaged vase. Dr. Morgan listened without interruption, nodding occasionally and taking brief notes. This pattern isn't new, she observed when I finished. What's different is your reaction to it. You seem ready to make a change. I am, I confirmed. I just don't know how to do it without causing a family meltdown. They're experts at making me feel like I'm being unreasonable whenever I assert myself. That's a common dynamic in families with narcissistic patterns, Dr. Morgan said. When you've been cast in a specific role. In your case, the accommodating, less important daughter, any attempt to step out of that role threatens the family system. They'll work hard to push you back into place. So what do I do? Just accept it? Not at all. But you need to be prepared for resistance. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things we do as adults, especially when those boundaries were never respected in childhood. We spent the rest of the session developing a strategy. Dr. Morgan helped me identify specific boundaries I wanted to establish and rehearsed how to communicate them clearly without being defensive or apologetic. We discussed techniques for staying calm when faced with dismissal or criticism, and how to recognize when I was falling back into old patterns of people-pleasing. The key, Dr. Morgan emphasized, is consistency. You can't set a boundary once and expect it to be respected, especially with a family that has ignored your boundaries for decades. You'll need to reinforce it repeatedly, without anger but with firmness. What if they just ignore me? Or worse, what if they cut me off? That's the fear that's kept you in this pattern for so long, isn't it? The fear of losing your family's love, conditional though it may be. I nodded, tears welling up despite my best efforts. Megan, I can't promise they'll respond well. They might not. But I can tell you this, continuing as you have been is guaranteed to cause you ongoing pain. At least by setting boundaries, you're creating the possibility of a healthier relationship with them, but more importantly, with yourself. I left Dr. Morgan's office with a clearer vision of what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. That evening, I drafted what amounted to a script for myself, key points I wanted to communicate clearly. 1. I love my family, but I need respect. 2. My home is my space, and decisions about it should include me. 3. Going forward, I expect to be asked, not told, about hosting events. 4. Comments about my intelligence or capabilities are unacceptable. 5. My accomplishments deserve acknowledgement, just as Lily's do. I practiced in front of my mirror, working to keep my voice steady and my message clear. I called Allison and rehearsed with her, letting her play the role of my dismissive mother to prepare for the resistance I might face. That was good, she said after our third run-through. But you started apologizing again toward the end. You have nothing to apologize for, Meg. I know, I sighed. It's just so ingrained. Well, keep practicing. and know that I've got your back. What time should I be there on Saturday? The party starts at 4, but my mother's arriving at noon to oversee final preparations. I'll be there at 3, Allison decided. Early enough to support you, late enough not to get dragged into setting up. And I'm bringing reinforcements. Reinforcements? Craig and Tasha from the office. They're dying to see your place anyway, and having more people in your corner will help balance out the family dynamic. I felt a surge of gratitude for Allison's unwavering support. Unlike my family, she had always seen me clearly, valued me genuinely. It occurred to me that while I had been desperately seeking approval from people unwilling to give it, I had overlooked the authentic connections I had formed elsewhere. The day before the party, I had one final conversation with Dr. Morgan. Remember, she said, this isn't about punishing your family or making them feel bad. It's about establishing a new, healthier dynamic. Keep your focus on that goal, not on any temporary discomfort or conflict. What if I lose my nerve? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Then you try again another time. This isn't a one-shot opportunity, Megan. Building self-respect is a process, not an event. But I believe you're ready for this. You've been preparing for it longer than you realize. As I drove home, I thought about my grandmother's vase, chipped but still beautiful, still valuable. Maybe I was a bit like that vase, damaged by years of careless handling but still whole, still capable of holding something beautiful. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm determination. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would know I had stood up for myself. That alone was a victory worth celebrating. The morning of Lily's engagement party dawned clear and perfect, the lake behind my house a sheet of glass reflecting the blue sky. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the beauty of the day, perhaps enjoyed a quiet coffee on my deck before the festivities began. Instead, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, knowing what lay ahead. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when the doorbell rang at 8:30 a.m. My mother stood on the doorstep with 2 catering assistants behind her, already issuing instructions before I had fully opened the door. These young men need to start setting up in the kitchen, she announced, sweeping past me. The rental company will be here at 9 with the tables and chairs, and the florist is scheduled for 10. We have a lot to accomplish before 4 o'clock. Good morning to you too, Mom, I said, but she was already directing the caterers toward my kitchen. Within an hour, my home was buzzing with activity. Rental workers assembled tables on my deck and arranged chairs in precise rows. Florists arrived with buckets of lilies and roses, setting up a workstation in my dining room. The caterers had completely taken over my kitchen, rearranging everything to suit their needs without consulting me. My mother fluttered between groups, clipboard in hand, checking items off her extensive list. When she noticed me watching from the hallway, she barely paused. Megan, don't just stand there. The linens need to be steamed. They're in the blue bags by the sofa. Mom, I wasn't planning on being part of the setup crew. I have some work to finish this morning. She looked up from her clipboard, her expression a mixture of surprise and disapproval. Work? Today? This is your sister's engagement party, Megan. Surely whatever you're doing can wait. Actually, it can't. I have a deadline on Monday. This was true, though the deadline wasn't as pressing as I implied. Still, I needed some time alone to center myself before the confrontation I knew was coming. Well, I suppose we can manage without you, she said with a sigh that clearly communicated her disappointment. But please be ready by 3. Wear something appropriate. That navy dress you wore to your cousin's wedding would be suitable. The navy dress she referred to was one she had selected for me years ago, a conservative style that I had never particularly liked. I had several new dresses that I preferred, including a deep green one that I had been saving for a special occasion. I'll choose something appropriate, I said neutrally, retreating to my office. I managed about an hour of productive work before the noise level made concentration impossible. Emerging from my office, I found Lily had arrived with her fiancé and his parents, who were being given a tour of my home as if it belonged to my mother. And this is the main living area, my mother was saying. We've arranged it to create better flow for the guests. It was quite cluttered before. Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. You've done wonders with the space, Judith. It's much more elegant than when we saw it earlier. They spoke as if I weren't standing right there, as if the cluttered space hadn't been my carefully designed home. I cleared my throat. Hello, Lily. Brandon. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson. They turned, seeming startled by my presence in my own house. Oh, Megan. Lily exclaimed. There you are. Isn't it looking amazing? Mom's worked so hard to transform the place. It certainly looks different, I said carefully. Megan, my mother interjected, why don't you put on some coffee for the Pattersons? They've had such a busy morning. It wasn't a request but a directive issued in front of guests to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. In the past, I would have complied automatically. Today, I hesitated. Actually, I need to finish something for work. The caterers can handle coffee, that's what we're paying them for. A brief, uncomfortable silence followed. My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, she said after a moment. How thoughtless of me to interrupt your work on such an important day for the family. The passive-aggressive barb was familiar, designed to make me feel selfish for prioritizing anything over family obligations. I recognized the tactic now, thanks to my sessions with Dr. Morgan, but it still stung. I retreated to my bedroom to change, selecting the deep green dress I had been saving rather than the navy one my mother preferred. When I emerged, my father had arrived and was deep in conversation with Brandon and his father about some recent changes to tax law. Megan, he acknowledged with a nod before immediately returning to his conversation. By 2 o'clock, final preparations were underway. The catering staff had transformed my kitchen into a production line of elegant hors d'oeuvres. My deck was unrecognizable, draped with twinkling lights and floral arrangements. The furniture in my living room had been rearranged to create a reception area that bore little resemblance to my usual setup. Megan, my mother called from the kitchen, come look at the cake and tell me what you think. I dutifully went to inspect the elaborate 3-tiered creation, decorated with sugar flowers that matched the party's color scheme. It's beautiful, I said honestly. I thought so too, she replied, seeming pleased with my approval. Though I'm not sure about the placement. I'm thinking we should move it to the center of the dining table rather than the side buffet. The dining table is quite far from the kitchen, I pointed out. The caterers will have a harder time serving it from there. My mother's expression shifted subtly. Well, we're not planning the party around the convenience of the staff, Megan. The dining table is more visible from the main entertaining area. That's where it should be. Before I could respond, Lily bustled in wearing a stunning pale pink dress that complemented her fair complexion perfectly. Mom. The flowers are wrong, she exclaimed, ignoring me completely. I specifically said blush pink roses, and these are definitely more coral. Let me see, darling, my mother said, immediately abandoning the cake discussion to attend to this new crisis. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by strangers preparing food for a party I hadn't wanted to host, feeling increasingly invisible in my own home. At precisely 3 o'clock, Allison arrived with Craig and Tasha from my office. Seeing their friendly faces was like a breath of fresh air in the increasingly suffocating atmosphere. Wow, Meg, your place looks different, Allison said tactfully as I gave them a tour of the transformed space. It certainly does, I agreed. Apparently my usual decor was too cluttered for an event of this caliber. Well, I liked it better before, Craig said loyally. It had more personality. My mother appeared as if summoned by the criticism. You must be Megan's work friends, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How nice of you to come early. Megan, shouldn't you be helping Lily? She's having an issue with her makeup. I'm sure Lily can manage her own makeup, Mom. She's been doing it for years. Well, yes, but this is a special day for her. She needs support. And I'm currently supporting my guests, I replied, gesturing to my friends. My mother's lips thinned slightly, but she maintained her social smile. Of course. How thoughtless of me. Enjoy yourselves. As she walked away, Tasha whispered, is she always like that? Pretty much, I confirmed. That was actually relatively mild. Guests began arriving at 4, and soon my home was filled with people I mostly didn't know. Brandon's large extended family dominated the gathering, with his mother making a point of introducing everyone to Lily's sister without ever using my name. My own relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins I rarely saw, seemed equally uninterested in engaging with me beyond brief hellos. I circulated through my own home feeling like an intruder, watching as strangers admired the view, complimented the decor, and enjoyed the food, all while crediting my mother or Lily for the beautiful setting. Your mother has done such a wonderful job with this party, my Aunt Rita told me, champagne in hand. And in such a lovely venue. You're lucky she was willing to organize everything. Actually, this is my house, I reminded her. I bought it last year. Yes, of course, she said, clearly having forgotten this fact. Well, it's nice that you could contribute the space for Lily's special day. By the time all the guests had arrived, I had been introduced as Lily's sister at least 20 times, had my professional accomplishments completely ignored in favor of questions about when I might settle down like Lily, and had overheard my mother tell at least 3 people that she had to help Megan organize everything as if I were an incompetent child rather than a successful professional who owned the very home where they stood. The final straw came when I overheard Lily talking to a group of her friends near the buffet. Yes, I just knew Meg's place would be perfect for the party, she was saying. The house was a bit of a fixer-upper when she bought it, but Mom and I helped her see the potential. And of course, I suggested most of the decor you see today. Meg's never had much of an eye for design, despite being an architect. It was a small comment, inconsequential compared to some of the things I'd overheard over the years. But standing in my beautifully designed home that I had worked so hard to create, hearing my sister casually dismiss my professional expertise to make herself look better, something inside me hardened into resolve. I glanced at my watch. Nearly 6 o'clock. According to the schedule my mother had created, toasts would begin soon, followed by dinner. If I was going to speak up, it would need to be soon. I caught Allison's eye across the room and gave her a subtle nod. She immediately made her way to my side. Ready? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. As ready as I'll ever be. The party was in full swing by the time my father tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, calling for everyone's attention. The murmur of conversation gradually died down as guests turned toward him, expectant smiles on their faces. He stood near the large windows overlooking the lake, the golden evening light creating a perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. Friends and family, he began, his surgeon's voice carrying easily through the room. Thank you all for joining us to celebrate the engagement of our daughter Lily to Brandon Patterson. As many of you know, Lily has always been the light of our lives, bringing joy and success to everything she touches. He launched into an anecdote about Lily's childhood achievements, followed by effusive praise for Brandon and his family. I stood quietly in the back of the room, watching as my sister beamed under the attention, her hand clasped tightly in Brandon's. And now, my father concluded, I'd like to thank Megan for generously offering her home for this special occasion. It's made for a beautiful setting. A brief smattering of applause followed as eyes turned toward me. My father raised his glass. To Lily and Brandon, may your future together be filled with happiness and success. To Lily and Brandon, echoed throughout the room as guests sipped their champagne. My mother stepped forward next, her practiced smile firmly in place. Before we continue with dinner, Lily and Brandon have a special announcement they'd like to make. Lily moved to the center of the room, practically glowing with excitement. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us. Brandon and I are so touched by your love and support. She paused, building anticipation. We're thrilled to announce that we've set a date. We'll be getting married next June at the Patterson family estate. Appreciative murmurs and a few delighted gasps rippled through the crowd. And, Lily continued, her smile widening, we have one more piece of news. After much discussion, we've decided on the perfect venue for our reception. My stomach tightened with sudden foreboding. My amazing sister Megan has offered to host our wedding reception right here, in this beautiful house. With this spectacular view and all the space, it's just perfect for what we envision. Isn't she the most generous sister ever? The room erupted in applause while I stood frozen in shock. I had offered no such thing. The idea hadn't even been mentioned to me, let alone discussed. Yet here was Lily, announcing to 75 people that my home would host an even larger event than the current one, without a single word to me beforehand. I felt Allison's hand on my arm, grounding me as the room seemed to tilt. Breathe, she whispered. Just breathe. Lily was still speaking, outlining plans for the reception, plans that would require significant changes to my home, including opening up my dining room to create a larger dance floor, something that would involve actual construction work. Of course, we'll help Megan with all the arrangements, she was saying. We know she's not really experienced with this sort of event. That was it. The moment had arrived whether I was ready or not. I stepped forward, moving through the crowd until I stood beside Lily. Her expression registered brief surprise before settling into a slightly patronizing smile. Did you want to say something, Meg? She asked, clearly expecting some emotional declaration of sisterly devotion. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I would. I turned to face the gathered guests, conscious of every eye on me, of my mother's suddenly wary expression, of Allison's encouraging nod from the back of the room. First, I want to congratulate Lily and Brandon on their engagement. I genuinely wish you both happiness. I paused, ensuring my tone conveyed sincerity. This wasn't about hurting Lily or ruining her moment. It was about establishing truth and respect. However, I continued, I need to clarify something. Contrary to what's been announced, I have not offered to host the wedding reception here. In fact, this is the first I'm hearing of it. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Lily's smile faltered, and my mother took a half step forward, clearly preparing to intervene. Actually, I pressed on before she could speak, I didn't offer to host this engagement party either. I was informed it would be happening here, with the arrangements already made, without my input or proper consent. The room had gone very quiet now. I could see Brandon's mother whispering to his father, their expressions disapproving. My father looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Lily's face had flushed a deep pink. Megan, my mother said with a tight laugh, this isn't the time for jokes. Everyone knows how happy you were to help with Lily's special day. That's just it, Mom. Everyone knows a lot of things about me that simply aren't true. Like how I'm not good at design, despite being an architect. Or how I need help organizing events in my own home. Or how I'm not experienced with this sort of thing. I took a deep breath, centering myself. What many of you don't know is that I purchased this house with my own money, earned through years of hard work at my architecture firm. I designed the renovation myself, selected every piece of furniture you see, and created the landscaping that frames the view you've been admiring. Some guests looked confused, others embarrassed. A few nodded encouragingly, seeming to appreciate my candor. For as long as I can remember, I've been treated as less capable, less important, less worthy of consideration than my sister. I've accepted this treatment because I desperately wanted my family's approval and love. But I've realized that no amount of accommodation on my part will ever change how they see me. My mother stepped forward, her expression a mixture of anger and panic. Megan, that's enough. You're embarrassing yourself and ruining your sister's party. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Mom. You're concerned about embarrassment and Lily's feelings, but not about the fact that you've been treating me disrespectfully for years. I turned to face her directly now. 2 weeks ago, I overheard you in this very kitchen, telling Lily you didn't know how someone so dumb could afford a nice place like this. Those were your exact words. Someone so dumb. gasps and uncomfortable shifting rippled through the crowd. My mother's face paled, her eyes widening in recognition. I didn't mean. She stammered. You did mean it, I said quietly. That's how you've always seen me. No matter what I achieve, no matter how hard I work, I'll always be the dumb one in your eyes. But here's the thing, Mom, I'm not dumb. I never was. I graduated with honors from a top architecture program. I've been promoted twice in 3 years. I designed award-winning commercial spaces. And I bought this house, which you've spent the entire day criticizing and rearranging as if I were incapable of creating a beautiful home on my own. Lily stepped forward, her expression contrite. Meg, I had no idea you felt this way. If I'd known. You did know, Lily, I interrupted gently. Every time you took credit for my ideas. Every time you dismissed my accomplishments. Every time you made plans that affected me without consulting me. You knew, but it was convenient to ignore it because it's always worked out in your favor. I addressed the room again. I'm not saying this to hurt my family or to ruin Lily's engagement celebration. I'm saying it because things need to change. I deserve to be treated with basic respect, especially in my own home. My voice grew stronger as I continued. So no, I will not be hosting the wedding reception here unless I am properly asked and included in the planning process. I will not continue to be an afterthought in my own life. And I will not allow anyone, family or not, to disrespect me or dismiss my achievements again. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, no one seemed to know how to respond. Then, to my surprise, my father cleared his throat. Megan is right, he said quietly. We haven't been fair to her. I haven't been fair to her. My mother turned to him, clearly shocked by his intervention. Lawrence. No, Judith, he interrupted, something I'd rarely seen him do. Listen to what our daughter is saying. Really listen. I've stood by for years while you favored Lily, while you dismissed Megan's accomplishments. I never stepped in because it was easier not to rock the boat. But that was wrong of me. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Megan. You deserved better from us. From me. His unexpected support nearly broke my composure, but I managed to maintain my steady gaze. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. Lily was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Meg, I never meant to hurt you. I never thought about how it felt from your side. I know, I said, softening slightly. That's the problem. No one in this family has ever really thought about how things feel from my side. Brandon, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing discomfort, surprised me by stepping forward. I think Megan has made some valid points, he said, addressing his own family as much as mine. If we're going to be joining families, we should be building relationships based on mutual respect. His mother looked scandalized, but his father nodded thoughtfully. My mother, however, was not so easily swayed. This is hardly the appropriate time or place for this discussion, Megan. You've made your point. Now can we please continue with the celebration? That's exactly what I'm talking about, Mom, I replied. You're still not hearing me. This isn't about timing or appropriateness. It's about fundamental respect. And until I feel that respect from you, from all of you, things can't go back to how they were. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the most difficult part. I love you all. I really do. But I need more from this family than I've been getting. I need acknowledgement of my worth. I need consideration for my feelings and my space. I need to be treated as an equal, not an afterthought. And if that's not possible, then perhaps we need to reconsider the nature of our relationship going forward. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavier than I had anticipated. For a moment, I wondered if I had gone too far, if this would be the moment that severed my family ties completely. But then I remembered Dr. Morgan's words, setting boundaries is about creating the possibility of healthier relationships, even if it causes temporary discomfort. I'm not asking for special treatment, I clarified. Just equal treatment. Equal consideration. Equal respect. Is that really so much to ask from the people who are supposed to love me most in this world? No one seemed to have an answer to that question. The silence stretched, uncomfortable but necessary. Finally, my father spoke again. No, Megan. It's not too much to ask. And it's long overdue. He turned to address the gathered guests. I think we all need some time as a family to process what's been said here. If you'll excuse us, perhaps we could take a short break before dinner is served. It was a graceful way to diffuse the tension, to create space for what needed to happen next. Guests murmured their understanding, some already gathering their belongings as if preparing to leave altogether. As the crowd dispersed toward the deck and garden, giving our family the privacy we needed, I stood my ground, trembling slightly but feeling more solid in myself than I had in years. Whatever happened next, I had finally spoken my truth. I had finally claimed my space in my home and in my family. And regardless of how they chose to respond, I knew I would never go back to being invisible again. The immediate aftermath of my confrontation was as awkward as I had anticipated. Guests lingered uncertainly on the deck and in the garden, their hushed conversations undoubtedly centered on the family drama they had just witnessed. The catering staff moved about with exaggerated efficiency, pretending they hadn't overheard everything. My family and I retreated to my study, the one room that had largely escaped my mother's redecorating efforts. Lily sat on the leather sofa, her makeup smudged from tears, while Brandon stood protectively behind her. My father leaned against my desk, looking older than I had ever seen him. My mother paced by the window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Well, she finally said, breaking the tense silence. I hope you're satisfied, Megan. You've certainly made quite a scene. Mom, Lily interjected before I could respond. That's not helping. My mother turned to her in surprise, clearly not expecting pushback from her favored daughter. Meg is right, Lily continued, her voice unsteady but determined. I haven't been fair to her. I've been so caught up in my own life that I never stopped to think about how my actions affected her. She looked up at me, her expression genuinely contrite. I'm sorry, Meg. I really am. I never meant to take advantage of you or dismiss your accomplishments. I guess I just took you for granted. Her apology, unexpected and seemingly sincere, caught me off guard. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. But then I remembered that this wasn't about extracting apologies or making my family feel guilty. It was about establishing a new, healthier dynamic. Thank you for saying that, Lily, I said carefully. I'm not trying to make you the villain here. I know you didn't deliberately set out to hurt me. None of you did. But intention doesn't change impact. My father cleared his throat. Megan's right. We've established patterns in this family that have been harmful, regardless of our intentions. He turned to me with an expression I'd rarely seen directed my way, respect. I'm proud of you for speaking up, Megan. It couldn't have been easy. My mother made a small, dismissive sound. This is all very dramatic. Yes, perhaps we've focused more on Lily at times, but that's hardly unusual in families. Different children have different needs. That's true, I acknowledged, determined to stay calm. But the issue isn't that you focused on Lily's needs. It's that you consistently ignored or dismissed mine. It's that you've treated me as less capable, less worthy, less important for as long as I can remember. That's simply not true, my mother protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I challenged gently. When was the last time you asked about my work, Mom? When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements the way you celebrate Lily's? When was the last time you considered my feelings before making decisions that affect me? She had no immediate answer. The thing is, I continued, I don't think you even realize you're doing it most of the time. It's so ingrained in how our family functions that it seems normal to you. But it's not normal or healthy to consistently devalue one child while elevating another. Brandon, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Mrs. Reynolds, if I may. I've only known your family for a short time, but even I notice the disparity in how you treat your daughters. And seeing Megan's home, hearing about her career, she's clearly accomplished and talented. I think perhaps you've underestimated her." My mother looked stunned, clearly not expecting criticism from this quarter. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, seemingly at a loss for words. My father stepped into the breach. "What matters now is where we go from here. Megan has expressed valid concerns, and we need to address them if we want to move forward as a family." "Exactly," I agreed. "I'm not saying this to punish anyone or to ruin Lily's engagement celebration. I'm saying it because I want us to have a healthier relationship, but that can only happen if things change." Lily wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "I want that too, Meg. I really do. Tell me what I can do." Her sincerity touched me. Perhaps there was hope for our relationship after all. "For starters, I'd appreciate being asked, not told, about hosting events in my home. That includes your wedding reception, Lily. If you'd like to have it here, we can discuss it, but it needs to be a genuine discussion where my input matters, not an announcement made without my consent." She nodded, looking embarrassed. "That's completely fair. I shouldn't have announced that without talking to you first. I got caught up in the excitement and, well, that's no excuse. And more broadly," I continued, "I need acknowledgement of my achievements and capabilities. I need to be treated as an equal in this family, not as an afterthought or a convenience." My father nodded solemnly. "You deserve that, Megan. We've failed you in that regard, and that needs to change." My mother remained silent, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed heavily. "I never intended to make you feel less than, Megan. Perhaps I've been less attentive to your needs and accomplishments than I should have been." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother, it was significant. "And as for that comment you overheard," she continued reluctantly, "it was thoughtless and cruel. I can't deny saying it, but I can say I'm ashamed of it. You are many things, Megan, but dumb has never been one of them." The acknowledgement, however belated, felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. "Thank you for saying that, Mom. Where do we go from here?" Lily asked, looking between us. "There are still 50 people outside expecting an engagement party." It was a fair question. Despite everything, I didn't want to ruin Lily's celebration completely. That wasn't the point of my stand. "We continue with the party," I decided. "But with a clear understanding that things will be different going forward. This is my home, and while I'm happy to share it for special occasions, that sharing needs to come with respect for my space and my boundaries." "That seems more than reasonable," my father agreed. We rejoined the party, offering a unified front despite the lingering tension. My mother made a brief announcement thanking everyone for their patience and inviting them to enjoy the dinner service. If guests noticed the strain in her smile or the careful distance she maintained from me for the remainder of the evening, they were polite enough not to mention it. Allison found me by the bar later, a questioning look in her eyes. "You okay?" "I think so," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "You were amazing," she said, squeezing my arm. "I've never seen you stand up to them like that." "I've never stood up to them like that," I admitted. It was terrifying, but also liberating. The weeks following the party brought tentative but noticeable changes. My mother called rather than texted, her conversations less directive and more inquiring. She actually asked about my current projects at work, listening with what seemed like genuine interest when I described the community center I was designing. My father invited me to lunch, just the two of us, something that had never happened before. Over salads at a quiet cafe, he spoke candidly about his regret at having been so passive in our family dynamic. "I saw what was happening," he admitted, "but it was easier to go along with your mother's preferences than to challenge them. That was cowardice on my part, and you deserved better. Why did it happen in the first place?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. Why was Lily always the favorite? He considered this thoughtfully. I don't think it was a conscious decision. Your mother saw herself in Lily, the same sociability, the same charm, the same way of moving through the world. You were always more like me, quieter, more analytical, more independent. I understood you, but I failed to advocate for you. That's my greatest regret as your father. His honesty was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated, opening the door to a relationship I'd never thought possible. Lily, perhaps the most surprising of all, made consistent efforts to change our dynamic. She called regularly, not to talk about herself as had been her pattern, but to ask about my life, my work, my interests. When she mentioned the wedding reception again, it was framed as a genuine request, not an assumption. Brandon and I would still love to have the reception at your place, she said cautiously, but only if you're truly comfortable with it. We can look at other venues if you prefer. I'd be happy to host it, I told her, appreciating her new approach, but I'd need to be involved in the planning in a meaningful way. Absolutely, she agreed immediately. In fact, I was hoping you might help design the layout. You have such a good eye for these things. The acknowledgement of my expertise, small though it was, felt like a significant shift. Brandon, too, seemed to view me differently after the confrontation. Where before he had barely acknowledged my presence, he now engaged me in genuine conversation, asking thoughtful questions about my architectural work and actually listening to the answers. I have a newfound respect for you, Megan, he told me during one visit. Standing up to your family like that took real courage. It's made me think about some dynamics in my own family that might need addressing. Perhaps the most meaningful change was within myself. I moved through my days with a new confidence, a certainty in my own worth that didn't depend on external validation. I spoke up more in meetings at work, proposed ideas I might have previously kept to myself, and even applied for a leadership position I would have once considered beyond my reach. Dr. Morgan noticed the difference immediately when I returned for a follow-up session. You're carrying yourself differently, she observed. More upright, more present. I feel different, I confirmed. Like I've reclaimed something essential that I didn't even realize I'd lost. That's what happens when we set healthy boundaries, she said with a smile. We don't just change our relationships with others, we change our relationship with ourselves. Not everything changed overnight, of course. My mother still occasionally slipped into old patterns, making comments or decisions that echoed our previous dynamic. But the difference now was that I could address these moments directly, without fear or apology. And more importantly, she would actually listen when I did. The first family gathering under our new terms, a casual Sunday brunch at my parents' home, felt awkward but hopeful. Conversation was more balanced, with space for everyone's voice. My mother actually asked about my recent promotion before turning to Lily's wedding plans. My father engaged me in a lengthy discussion about sustainable architecture, a subject he'd never shown interest in before. Small changes, perhaps, but significant ones. As I drove home that afternoon, I thought about my grandmother's vase, which now sat repaired and prominently displayed on my mantel. Like our family, it bore the marks of damage but remained whole, perhaps even more valuable for having been mended with care and attention. Allison called that evening to check in. How was it? Disaster or progress? Progress, I said with certainty. Slow, imperfect progress. That's all you can ask for, she replied. Rome wasn't built in a day, and family dynamics don't change overnight. True, I agreed. But for the first time, I feel like change is actually possible. Like I have a voice in my own family story. And that, perhaps, was the most profound transformation of all. After years of silence, of acceptance, of diminishing myself to fit the role I'd been assigned, I had finally found my voice. And having found it, I would never allow it to be silenced again. What would you do if you were in my position? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect you? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, Please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to speak your truth, whatever that may be.